This right here is my city, Nairobi. And today I'm on a bus. It's a one-way ticket back home. So there's this idea that whenever things are not working in the city, the alternative is to go back home, go back to Ocha, where it shows that you've given up, essentially. Most of us don't want to make that move because it's evidence that we've failed to live the dream life. I came to the city 15 years ago. I came because of school and I stayed. When I was done with college for 4 years, I stayed with the hope that I was going to get a job, become employed, and join the workforce and live the life. And the city offers a lot. See all these people around here? They're chasing a dream. You're all chasing a dream. The Kenyan dream of living big, of earning a decent income and saving and investing maybe and retiring happily back in the village or in the countryside rather. For me, that dream proved futile. And at 35, I'm taking an early retirement. Is it the ideal? No. Am I doing it willingly? No, because I've not been employed since college. No agency has ever employed me since college. Not because I didn't have the required qualifications, but because I guess the unemployment rate in Kenya is just horrible. And I'm one of the victims. But what do I do? Do I just sit and wallow myself in self-pity? I'm choosing to escape the rat race because I found myself immersed in arrears, rent arrears. A month comes and you don't have a salary and you need to pay the agents and you don't have nothing. As I make this trip, I didn't carry anything from my house because I'm in rent arrears. The doors have been closed on me. So I'm just leaving to go re-strategize and then I'll know how to come back and get the things that I'm leaving behind. The thing is, normally, when you're not able to pay the rent, the landlord takes a few of your properties. They come scout around for electronics mostly, or things that they can resell to get their rent back. Over time, what that does is all the things that you've been investing to buy you end up losing them. They end up in the hands of the landlord because you didn't pay the rent for this month, so they took the TV. You didn't pay for the next month, so they'll take the fridge. The coming month, they'll take the cooker. And by the time you're making this trip back home, you essentially have nothing to your name, nothing to show the people in the village that you actually did come from the city because you have these belongings. So it's safe for you to go back to the village and just say, oh well, I sold the items. But of course, the people close to you know that you didn't even sell the items because you have no money on you. It's crazy. That's the life we live here in. Okay, for me, that's my experience. That has been my experience. And today, as I make this trip, it's a bittersweet moment. Sweet because I'm finding a way out. Rather than just giving up and dying in depression in the city because I want to catch up with the Joneses, let me just go back home, re-strategize. If the city calls me back once again, it will be after I've fully realized what I want to do with my life. If not, then I'll maybe thrive in the village. The cost of living here when you do not have a job is quite high. And for you to get a decent home to stay in the city, you have to pay enough rent. Otherwise, you'll end up in one of those horrible neighborhoods where you're risking congestion. I've lived in a place where you're really scared of thieves coming in even during the day. So when you leave home and you come back and you find your property still intact, you're grateful because the security in that region, in that area is horrible. But how do you escape that? You need money to move to the better side of the city. And that money is hard to come by. So you end up just stuck in that horrible neighborhood that you really don't like, but you've got to just survive. You're not living, you're just surviving from month to month, hoping for the best. But I remember life in the countryside. This is January, and I was there during the holidays. And the life there, as much as there are fewer opportunities to make a decent income, life there is so much more dignified. So dignified that you'll feel a sense of well-being even when you don't have enough cash, because you get to eat fresh food, you get to eat direct from your farm, so you don't depend on your money to feed you. You can depend on the energy to feed you, because if you have a little piece of land, then you can cultivate. And land is also easy to acquire, even for lease. So you can cultivate and plant your own vegetables at least. At the very least, you'll have decent food. The housing is also rather good, rather decent, clean environment, clean fresh air to breathe in, no congestion for sure. I feel like it's a more dignified way to live when you're living below the minimum wage. And so for me today, I'm making this decision to go back to the village, and it's a journey for me. Of course, it's full of uncertainties because I do not know what awaits me there. I am second guessing myself every step of the way. I'm not so sure that I'm making the right decision. I'm moving away from the bonds that I've created in my adulthood, the bonds that have carried me through the toughest times of my life and the happiest ones too, the friends that I've shared my adulthood with. And I'm moving actually not to my countryside, but to another area altogether to try and start over. Starting over at 35 feels overwhelming. I'm feeling a sense of something like a midlife crisis. I don't know. Should the midlife crisis start at 35? Or is it just me? There's this overwhelming feeling of being lost, of not knowing which path to take, of redefining my purpose, of really sitting down and thinking about what I want to do with my future or how I want my future to look like, of taking the power back to my hands to do that which I need to do, to live the life I will want for myself. And that requires hard decisions, decisions that I really don't have a choice but to make, because they say after 30 you're now the background, you're now the pillar. You can no longer blame your family or your friends, or your nobody to blame for your decisions. So now you got to take more accountability, more responsibility for your actions, for your choices. And today I'm making this choice for me. If I were to ask around the people that I value for their opinions, most of them will say no. Most of them will say it's a horrible decision. Most of them will say Nairobi is where the opportunities are. It's where you're more likely to thrive. It's where you're more likely to make a difference in your life. But I've been here for the last 15 years and that has not been the case for me. Rather, I just make the much cash I make out of self-employment because I'm not formally employed, and it all goes back to the hands of the landlord or the vendors for food or for commuting from one place to another. And as much as we are enjoying all this beautiful infrastructure around here, I own none of it. I do not have a share in any of this beautiful infrastructure, the good roads, the good malls, shopping malls that I barely afford, the beautiful environment and buildings that I have no share in. So whenever you're in town, you're enjoying, but when you get out of the town to your shanty little residence that you can barely pay rent for, you feel so 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 much more or less dignified. It's not an environment that I will wish to raise my family in, because then it communicates to them that they're less of people, less of a person, because they can't be judged from the side of the city they're coming from. And when it's horrible, then you have these self-limiting beliefs that might crop up. You have these horrible peers that might shape how the children think. Essentially, I think Nairobi is much, or any city for that matter, is much better for you if you have the cash to survive or live rather than survive within the city. If you have the means, then it's good for you, because then you can move up from the shanty living conditions to a more peaceful environment, a more calm and organized and protected environment where you can raise your children in peace or something. But for us that are straining to live in the city, then the struggle is too much to lose, and so little to gain, come to think of it. Of course, I would have loved to be in a position to own some property in Nairobi and build. That will be the ideal. If you build in Nairobi, then you're good, because then you're not paying rent, you can get your own food, and you have access to amenities as you still try and survive in this city. But to pay rent worth 15,000 when you can barely even make the 15,000 yourself, and end up in rent arrears, and end up in fear, living in fear that whenever you step out of the house, you might come back and find two padlocks on your door. It has happened to me severally. You come back, you're tired, you just want to rest in this house that you're paying 15,000 for, that is really, really, really tiny, not even worth it. And because you're late with your rent, there's a padlock on the door. But worse still, when you go to ask for favor, it's like you're begging and saying, oh, please help me, I need to just sleep today and then I'll sort you out as soon as possible. Now you have to beg You're begging the agent, you're not even begging the landlord. And it's this somebody that is actually way beneath you in purchasing power, but because he has this position he's holding, he dehumanizes you so much that you feel worthless, that you feel frustrated with life. And so you're begging for a basic need for shelter. You beg for shelter, you end up giving up some of your properties because you really do need shelter, of course. So you let go of your properties in exchange for the shelter. And this goes on month 1, month 2, and month 3. A wise man once said that if you do the same thing over and over again and expect different results, then you're a fool. And so this year, as it starts, I choose not to be a fool. I choose to do something about it. I choose to try, at least. At the very least, I will have tried. Rather than die in depression out of all the needs in the city, I'm taking what I could call a sabbatical. A sabbatical leave to try and see what the other side of life holds. Wish me well. I'll be updating you and letting you know how that goes for me. Am I confident? Certainly not. Am I afraid? So much so. Afraid of the unknown, afraid of failing once again, afraid of judgment from people that I know, afraid of all that could go wrong, afraid that this might not work and I'll be back to square one. But even as I am afraid, I'm just doing it. I'm doing it afraid, I'm doing it uncertain, I'm doing it with faith that all will work out well and I'll carve out a decent life for myself and my family. Thank you for coming through this journey with me.